Hi guys, over the next videos we are going to build a dynamic dashboard that uses pivot charts with slicers that are interconnected with the charts. We are also building a scrollable table where you can scroll through the data both vertically and horizontally. Finally, we are going to use text boxes to display high-level numbers. Today we are going to start building the pivot tables, pivot charts, and create dot slicers that interact with the pivot charts. So let's get started. So to start, we can see here our dashboard sheet. So this is the space we have to build our dashboard. And let's start by going to raw data sheet. Let's select with Control A all our data and let's create a pivot table by pressing Alt and V. And then keep the same settings and just press Enter. Here, the first thing I want to is to give a name to our pivot table. So we call it PVT, so pivot table, and we say by supplier. Copy this name and let's also call our tab pivot table by supplier. Let's drag this and let's start building our pivot table. So now what we need is the supplier field in rows and also the GP value in the box value. Now what we need is to format our numbers. Go to number format. Let's go to currency and let's take the decimal places, press OK. Let's sort our data by largest to smallest. Let's also remove the grid lines for this one. And in order to have our pivot tables all connected, what we need now is to copy this pivot table and create a new one in a new sheet in this case. So what we can do is go to pivot table, analyze. Let's select the entire pivot table. Let's copy. Let's go to another sheet or create another sheet and let's paste this pivot table. Let's resize our pivot table as well. And now let's change the fields for by type. So this is the next chart we're going to have. So we remove supplier and put type in rows. And now for this one, what I want to do, and let's call it pivot table by type. Copy this name and let's call our sheet the same thing. Let's create our last pivot table again by going to pivot table, analyze, select entire pivot table, copy, create a new sheet and paste this pivot table in the new sheet. Now in this table, let's change or remove type and put by month. And let's call this tab pivot table by invoice, and in our pivot table name we can also put the same name, and your pivot tables are all created. Also, let's move this pivot table up a little bit to be the same structure as the one we had before. Let's choose A1 and all of them are now in the right place. The next thing we want to do is to create some pivot charts. So if we press the pivot table we go to pivot table, analyze, and then we just click pivot chart. This will make Excel to prompt us already with all the data inside of the chart, and the only thing we need to do is to choose which chart we want. So in this case, let's keep this one, press OK, and let's just format this a little bit and also create the other charts and format as well. So now what we need to do is to create some slicers in order for our dashboard to start being dynamic. So this is the important part. Because we copied each new pivot table from our original one, so our first, these pivot tables are connected. So anytime now we create a slicer, we're going to be able to connect all of them and interact with all of them at the same time. So if we go to our dashboard, we click in one of these charts and we go to pivot chart, analyze, and we click in insert slicer. And now we need to choose which ones we want to create as a slicer. So our first one we can say is supplier, the other one is by type, and we can say that we also want one by month. And press OK. This will create these three slicers. If I press one of these buttons, it seems that these slicers are only connected to this chart. So But what we want is to have these slicers connected with all of these shards. So what we need to do, let's go to our report connections, and we want to say that we want this slicer to be connected to all of our pivot tables, so all of these that we created. So we press OK, and we do the same thing for all of them. And again, check all of those boxes. And now when we interact with these slicers, all of our shards are going to change based on our option. Now let's also test another one. And it seems fine. You can also press one of these, and if you hold Control and click May, this will also change based on multiple choices. And again, let's try October as well, and we get the data that is associated with these choices. So let's unfilter everything and let's make this better. So now if we interact with our filters related to our charts, we're going to see them changing based on our choice. So if we press January, we're going to have our suppliers associated with the invoices that are related to January. And we can press Control and press May as well. And this will all change with our filters. I can see here that there is a small adjustment we need to do. So one thing we can do here, we go to our type pivot table, and we can use our if A2 is equal to grand total. Don't want anything, otherwise we want A2. And here we can do the same thing. If A2 is equal to grand total, don't want any value, otherwise we want B2. In this case, we need to actually say B2 instead of clicking in the pivot table. So now let's copy this down, and our pivot chart, or in this case it's just a chart, is going to exclude the grand total. Now if we come back to our dashboard, clear all the filters, and let's press a filter or any option in the filter, and now it seems okay. So this part is done. In the next video, we are going to look on how to build a scrollable table where you can move horizontally or vertically.